I'm going to show you 5 things you need to have in your toolkit if you're going to cook a great brisket, so don't go anywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Todd with Greenhorn Barbecue and Beer. The Sassy Kitchen Queen is out cooking some delicious holiday cookies right now. She might pop in, I don't know, but tonight I have you all to myself. So before we get started on tonight's show, I'd like you guys to go ahead and smash that red subscribe button and tap that bell so you don't miss a thing. So this is the channel where backyard cooking is king. We take you on a barbecue crawl once in a while to some interesting, fun places, and we give you some really neat backyard cooking recipes for you to try out. So recently I picked up this really good, smaller sized full packer brisket from Costco. It was about $3.49 a pound. It was 10 pounds before I ended up trimming it up. It was a really nice piece of meat, so I snatched it up. I wasn't quite ready to cook it yet, so we went ahead and froze it. And about a week later, we thawed it out and got ready to cook. Cheers. So when you're thawing out a piece of meat, a good rule of thumb is to put it in your refrigerator and allow 1 day for about every 5 pounds of meat that you have. So in this case, 10-pound brisket, it took a full 2 days to really thaw out really well. So this was a really early morning cook. It was a Saturday morning. I got up 3 a.m. and I really didn't want to get up, but that's kind of how I wanted to time this cook. And I took it out of the fridge, unpacked it. One thing you want to do is have a nice clean area to cook in, avoid any splatter. So we always use our island. It's away from the sink, and that's where contamination happens. So cut it open, I had the trash can nearby, and came up to the very first thing I realized is a good top 5 thing to have in your toolkit. And this is tool number 1, a knife. Now we're not talking about a little pocket knife. We're talking about a really sharp, bony knife of your choice. This one happens to be a Gunther Wilhelm. It's a really good quality knife. I won it at a Steak Cook-Off Association ribeye competition. That's about a $65 knife, that's what they tell me. It's a very handsome knife, and it's very sharp. And that's what you want when you're going to trim brisket. Trim a brisket when it's cold. It's a lot easier to cut the fat and different parts of the brisket when it's nice and cold. Get your hand up under there and really go to town with cutting off certain pieces of the brisket. What I like to do is go along the edges and cut off a lot of that harder kind of, I don't know what to call it, but it's just around the edges. You'll see it. It's a really hard line of meat that it's really just, to me, it's unedible. So I cut it away, kind of reveal the side of the fat cap and kind of get a nice look about how thick that fat is. I like to kind of smooth out the point a little bit and kind of cut away some of that really hard fat, that fat that's not going to render down, it's not going to eat well, so I'm going to cut it away. I'm also going to round off as much as I can the point area, the lean end of the brisket. Now, in competition, which I haven't done with a brisket yet, but I've watched the videos, a lot of people will really cut that back and round it off. But that's for a competition cook. In a backyard where we're going for the yield, you want to, take care and not get rid of too much of the meat. So I just kind of did a really light, very, very light trimming on the point. Now on the fat cap, again, after I cut away the sides of the gristle and just the parts I didn't want to have to worry about later on, I got a good idea of how thick that fat cap was. And so in a lot of places it was well over a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch. Some people leave a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. I was going for about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. It's really hard to judge. But take your thumb, feel around, and you're gonna kind of feel where it's kind of hard and firm, and you want to cut down until you start to feel give, and it feels flexible. Now this takes a lot of practice, which I absolutely don't have yet. But you're going to want to trim it down until you get to about a 1/4 inch, and that seems to be a really good spot. So be careful. I did mess up in a couple places with this Gunther Wilhelm. It's not hard to do. So just take your time, do it right, do it while it's cold. Take your time. Did I say that? I think I said it too many times. And if you're going to be making sausage, this is a good time to save this meat. Some pieces you don't want to save. The really hard fat, you might as well just throw that away. But there's a lot of other parts of the trimming that, I'll leave that up to you, obviously. But if you want to save it, save it. Okay, so the number 2 thing, let's see, did I start with number 5 or number 1? Well, the number 2 thing that I think everyone needs in their toolkit for cooking a good brisket is a meat injector. Get a nice shot of that. So just a basic injector will work. There's many varieties out there. Mine obviously is a little different. It almost looks like an actual medical device. It's very handy. Make sure you get spare tips and use any number of injection fluids that you want. A lot of people will use their own mixture of broth. Some people in the pork community will use Dr. Pepper. But with brisket, I'm not going to take any chances. And so I used a Cosmos brisket injection, and I'm not plugging Cosmos at all. It's just what I happen to have. It's a mixture you mix with water and let it sit overnight in your fridge to let a lot of the solids settle out. So after we're done trimming, I went ahead and went around and I started injecting the brisket. This takes a lot of practice as well. Go with the grain, get in there at an angle, keep your hand over it, and just really feel where you're injecting, and move that needle in there and kind of move around, create a pocket, and just kind of play with it. Over time, you're gonna get better at this. I'm still getting better because I'm absolutely not an expert at injecting meat, but I know what I like, and I really like the way injection behaves with the meat, especially after a really long cook, and especially on those sides of the brisket that are really lean, like the flat. So after I injected it all up, I went ahead and patted it dry a little bit, and then I pulled out some coarse black pepper. I gave it a very generous coating of coarse black pepper. I skipped the salt and I went with a Harry Sue's kind of rub. Again, this is something I just happen to have laying around, and I'm not plugging Harry Sue's at all. It is good. Go light with it. It's got a little spice to it. I found that it tastes really good and it really works well for me. All right, so once I was done spicing it up, I set the Traeger up. I have a Traeger Lil'Tex Elite, I think it's called. That's a 22 series pellet smoker that I've had probably about 8 or 9 years now. It's handy, it's reliable. I haven't had any problems with it. And I've got some other videos. Maybe I'll put one up here for a review, but I really like the Traeger. I like pellet grills because it gives you a really good option if you just don't have time to mess around with a stick burning offset smoker. So I set the Traeger for 250 and I set it on there, and it was probably about 15 minutes to 4. So it took me about 45 minutes to trim and season, inject that brisket, and the Traeger came up to temperature probably in about 10 minutes, which is great with the Traeger. I topped off the pellets, made sure they were nice and dry, and then I put that brisket on. In this case, I went brisket fat side down because the Traeger has a lot of heat coming up from the bottom. So I put the fat cap toward the direction of the heat. Now, if you have an offset smoker with the heat's coming from one end, you could turn and put the point facing the fire, because typically the point has a little bit more fat, a little bit more protection for the rest of the meat. Again, totally a preference thing. It's up to you, but this is how I chose to do it. So one of the things you want to do when you're smoking a brisket is monitor that temperature. Now, there's a couple key temperatures you got to pay attention to. So that brings me to the third thing that a good pitmaster should have in their toolkit, and that's a Thermapen by ThermoWorks. This is a great handy Thermapen. There's a little sensor on here that you might be able to tell that when it gets dark, it lights up. When it's light, you don't typically see it. And it went off. Also, the digital readout turns with the pen. Okay, so while you're smoking that brisket, remember, if you're looking, you ain't cooking. There's one first key temperature that you're looking for, and that's about 165, 170, right in there. A lot of people will use that as the stall temperature. Sometimes a brisket will stall at about 165. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that there's a lot of cold inside that brisket and a lot of heat on the outside, and they're meeting at a certain point. The cold's trying to escape and the heat's trying to get in, and they get to a point to where basically there's a standoff, and that's kind of the stall. Eventually the heat's going to win, and the cold's going to go away, and you've broken the stall. So one of the ways of telling about how fast you're getting there and where you're currently at is just with this Thermapen. It's a great addition to any toolkit. Highly recommend it. And as a bonus, I'd say probably right there with it is this meter probe. Get a little close up of this meter probe. Okay, again, I'm not endorsing this product other than it works for me, and it's a great thing to have in the toolkit. Comes with a case. This one did. There's a little battery compartment on the back. Comes with a box that it holds in, and you can check the battery status with the little button right here. Again, kind of hard to see. See that little green light coming on there? I've never had to recharge it. It's always worked. Never had a battery issue at all. So this is, again, it's by meter. I'll drop a link down in the description. And it's pretty much foolproof. Comes with an app on your smartphone. Pretty much foolproof. One of the limiting factors with these wireless meat probes is that the larger smokers, the signal is going to have a hard time getting out to your phone, to your app with this. So there's a couple other products. One's called a meter block, and it might help you with working that out. So I haven't really spoken about spritzing. A lot of people recommend you spritz, but with the amount of injection that I ended up putting into this brisket, it was really moist. I had the fluid literally oozing out of this thing as it was coming up to 165, so I really didn't have to spritz it. So just before I wrapped it, I took some Campbell's beef broth and I dribbled it very lightly, but about 6 or 8 ounces, and I put it all over the top of it slowly enough to where it kind of it got absorbed by that bark, and you want to do it just enough to where it doesn't pour off. But you'll see it almost. But you'll see that the bark will tend to absorb almost a whole can on some of these larger briskets of this beef broth. So trust me on this, it's going to add so much more flavor to your brisket and moisten it up just before you wrap it. So speaking of wrapping, once you're past the stall, get your pink butcher paper and you're going to wrap it up. So I use enough to go at least 2 full revolutions of the meat. And then I'm going to end up making sure I got the fat side down again. And then I'm going to put it right back on that Traeger. I'm going to make sure I stay at 250 and I finish it off. Now, since this is a 10-pound brisket, it really didn't take too long to get to that point. I'd say it was about 4 hours from the time I put it on, again at 250, until it came to about 170. It was only about 4 hours. Again, after all the trimming, we're talking about an 8.5-pound brisket. So I wrapped it up, and then I put it right back on, right at 250. And again, using my Thermapen, once that thing reached to about 205, I pulled it off. I wrapped it up in some old towels that I have and put it in a cooler, kind of a pancake cooler, like it's flat. And it's just the right size for a 10 to 15 pound brisket. And I let it rest in that cooler for about another 4 hours. And so really there is no rule about how long you should have your brisket resting. Over time, I'm hoping to get the feel of it. You'll get the feel of it, how long you really need to rest. I personally like to rest my brisket long enough to really kind of let that meat settle down and calm down and let all those juices reabsorb into the meat. And especially with all that injection and that Campbell's beef broth that we put on there, it's going to give the brisket an opportunity to reabsorb a lot of moisture. That's the bottom line. Okay, so when we finally got ready to eat, it was time to pull that brisket out and unwrap it. And let me tell you, our kitchen smelled wonderful. It was the best smell if you've ever smelled a brisket that's been cooking with a lot of beef broth and nice seasonings. It was just a wonderful thing. It's going to smell great. I was hungry from 3 a.m. on, and so it was about 4 p.m. when we decided to cut this thing up. And that's going to be probably number 5 in the toolkit of must-have. Get yourself a nice long serrated kind of knife. Again, brand is probably a preference of what you want, but make sure that it's long enough. This is, I think, a 13-inch, but get you one. You're going to need it. It's going to help out so much better Again, I'll drop a link down in the description to some of these products, and go check it out yourself. But definitely have a few of these, in fact. Not gonna hurt. And a bonus number 6, have a nice Christmas mug for your tasty beverages. So there you have it, folks. 5 great things to have in your toolkit when cooking a brisket. And along the way, I hope I've showed you a few tips and techniques where you're gonna have a really good time and your brisket's gonna turn out great. So what I showed you tonight is our go-to recipe for briskets, and we're gonna try to perfect our briskets using these basic principles that I just showed you. So there's a lot of different ways to cook briskets, a lot of different opinions. I wouldn't call this particular method Texas style, although I love Texas style brisket. I've given it my own twist and watching YouTube videos. And so I hope you liked the video. I hope you learned a few things and picked up a few techniques you can use while you're cooking a brisket. So be sure to hit the description up and check out some of the links that'll drop down there for you to go check out on our Amazon store. Just full disclosure that none of these products are going to cost you a single penny more if you follow our links in the description. It's really just going to help us support the channel and bring you guys more videos. And if you have any questions, be sure to comment down below. And if you happen to have your own product that you'd like us to review and check out, be sure to hit us up in the description for our email at greenhornbarbecue@gmail.com, and we'll set something up. All right, guys, until next time, be sure to hit up that red subscribe button, tap that bell so you don't miss a thing, and be sure to say hello on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, Pinterest.